Hello, my name is Josh Sweeney, and welcome to a FounderScale Scaling B2B educational session. For this release of Scaling B2B, we have a 30-minute episode from an educational webinar that we delivered titled Increasing B2B Sales with Sales Engagement Platforms. Now, it is important to know that we recently switched from using the term sales engagement platforms, which you'll hear in this webinar, over to sales engagement events. We did that mainly so that people don't get confused with sales engagement platforms in the software sense, which is what that term is really most known for. Now, the great thing about sales engagement events is that they give prospects a reason to engage with your sales team. In this educational webinar highlight, we cover how to drive sales engagement with webinars, interview-style podcasts, and small group events. So, let's dive in. Thank you everyone for joining the webinar. Looks like we have a great turnout today, which means that all of you are interested in learning new ways to increase your B2B sales. Before we get into sales engagement platforms, which is our topic for today, I'd like to share a little bit about myself and FounderScale. My name is Josh Sweeney, the founder of FounderScale. I'm a member of the Atlanta chapter of the Entrepreneur Organization. I'm actually president-elect for the 21-22 year, which I'm really excited about. So as you might expect, I have a passion for entrepreneurship and helping other entrepreneurs succeed, as well as the teams that they have around their sales and marketing teams. I'm married and have two boys. I coach and lead in sports activities. So that's a little bit about me. I started in 2009, I started a CRM consulting firm, which I bootstrapped to a few million in revenue before selling it in 2016. And during that journey, I learned numerous costly sales and sales leadership lessons. You see, in the last company, I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars figuring out how to generate sales in a founder-led B2B business, which is quite unique. And it's because of those challenges and the lessons I learned that I started FounderScale, where we specialize in increasing sales specifically in founder-led B2B businesses. Now, in today's webinar, I'm going to share with you the ways that we can utilize sales engagement platforms to increase B2B sales. So let's start this presentation with a real-world scenario that I know all of you have had happen before. I call this, don't worry, this isn't meant really to be read, but I call this the contact and pitch methodology. This is the situation where a person reaches out to you, for example, on LinkedIn or via email, like this individual. They connect to us, and then they immediately follow up with a very long message, usually, telling us about their company, and then immediately asking for a meeting. Now, I'm sure many of you have had this happen before, but the real question is, why does this happen? Well, it happens because, surprise, it actually works. People wouldn't do the contact and pitch methodology if it didn't work. The problem is, and what we found, it doesn't work very well. It works just enough that sales reps continue to do it without really looking for alternatives. So to provide some insight, let's look at metrics using that same methodology, that contact and pitch methodology via email. In column one, what you're going to see, I'm going to explain these columns real quick just so you know what you're looking at. You see unique contacts, so that's unique people in the database. Those are target audience, specific target audience that we would be going after from a prospecting perspective to do business with. The emails in sequence is the number of follow-ups that they get, the number of emails that we're sending to try and get a meeting with them. Valid engagements is responses, like legitimate responses to those of interest, and then the percentage of engagement based on those numbers. So what you'll see is of 452 contacts on this first line, we had 2 emails in the sequence. And to clarify, this is one email and then a follow-up email after that. And this is from a sales rep. This isn't just marketing emails. With this sequence, we had 3 people that showed valid interest. Now, this wasn't the same contact and pitch on LinkedIn. It's using email, but the numbers are very similar and the methodology is exactly the same. I'm reaching out, you don't know me, and now I'm going to pitch you for a meeting. And this is a one-to-one sequence, as I mentioned, from a sales rep just using the email. So in this small sample where we engaged 452 or worked on engaging 452 unique contacts, we only got a 0.6% engagement. So again, does this work? Yes. We received 3 valid leads from only 452 contacts, which isn't bad. But I'm going to show you some comparison data in just a little bit around, how well it really works. Now, another one was a much smaller batch that was 188 unique contacts that you see here. They actually received a 3-part email sequence. And this one was a little more sophisticated in that initially those contacts were all in the technology industry. And we were also sharing a case study from another company that our customer worked with that had a technology case study. And in that one, again, small batch, but we actually, out of 188, we received 0 interest. So that's 0%. As you can see, this works to a varying degree. Now, obviously, the numbers change with volume. We wouldn't expect a 0 if we ramp that up. But the numbers were still pretty low in a small batch. So consistency is key on any outbound methodology. The last one that you see is the 5,000 unique contacts. So when we were working with a prospect to get one of their first webinars launched, they were sending 5,000 emails to 5,000 unique contacts, and their expectation and results were generally about 5 valid engagements from that email and those sequences and that outreach. And even at 5,000 with 5 valid engagements, that's 5 net new meetings you have, which is good, right? People keep doing it because it's good enough. But if we look at the utilization of the data and the actual percentage engagement, you see that that's a 0.10%. It's a very low engagement for all of that volume and all the work that you're doing. So this is really why people run these types of campaigns. But as you can see from an effectiveness perspective, it's not very effective when you look at that percentage engagement number or percentage of conversion. So do they work? Yes, to a degree. But what we like to do at FounderScale is constantly look at what is effective, the degree of effectiveness, and then determine if there are better options. The other thing that we observed is that the primary reasons that companies do the contact and pitch model and kick over to this volume is they don't really have anything valuable to offer the prospect to pull them in. So this is all they have. All they have is the ability to send this email. They don't have any content or sales enablement content that really is a wow item or something that can help that prospect, that helps them be brought into the relationship and start that relationship building. And that valuable piece of content is what leads to the low engagement rates that we're seeing here. The solution for this is sales engagement platforms. Sales engagement platforms give people a reason to engage with your sales reps and yourself. Because instead of trying to immediately get someone's time for what they know is a sales call, you're offering information that might help them solve a problem. So for the rest of the webinar today, we're going to share with you the value of 3 different types of sales engagement platforms. Number 1 being webinars. Number 2 being interview style podcast, a specific way of podcasting. And then number 3, we're going to roll into some other options and add-ons to the webinar methodology. So let's get started with webinars. Now, we're a HubSpot partner, and they have a really robust webinar page. So I'm going to use part of their page as an example. And please keep in mind that although we are a HubSpot partner, we can help you deliver this on any other platform, whether it's a different marketing automation or CRM solution. To start with, I'm going to highlight 2 things in this image that you see here that I think are very important. The one on the left is an upcoming webinar where you can learn about account-based marketing and HubSpot. Now, we're huge fans of account-based marketing here at FounderScale, so stay tuned for some other webinars on that topic. Now, if you're on their website, the HubSpot website, and you clicked on this webinar, you would get a form to fill out to attend, much like you did for this webinar. And that would be considered a sales engagement with that prospect. You're starting to engage that prospect. They're interested in what you're providing. Now, once the webinar is delivered and recorded, you actually get some reuse, which you'll see on the right-hand side up here at the very top. It says on-demand webinar. And with an on-demand webinar, that means that the webinar already took place. You can go click it, fill in a form, and watch it right now when you have time. So you don't have to worry about when when the webinar originally happened. You can just go ahead and take a look at the content because that's helpful for you. The great thing about this is that the resources build up over time and they have additional value that I'm going to highlight. The next thing I'd like to point out is the educational tone of the topics. So we work with a lot of clients, and at first they have a very self-oriented way of hosting a webinar. They're talking about themselves instead of providing an educationally oriented topic, where the prospect then walks away with value. And as a side note, I'd highly recommend that you read Building a Story Brand, and that really helps with the tone and messaging across the board from a sales and marketing perspective. As in this example, or as an example to what I just said, we hope that you're hearing the educational tone of the webinar today. Our real goal is that we want to tell you what sales engagement platforms are, how they can help you, how they can outperform the contact and pitch model, and how you can use them in your business. So what are some of the other benefits of a webinar over that contact and pitch methodology? Well, as I highlighted, they're very educational, which means people are going to sign up for them more often because they feel like if they sign up, they can spend 30, 40, or 45 minutes, or maybe even an hour with you, and they're going to walk away with information that is going to help them today. And that's what we really hope for you today, is you're going to walk away with food for thought and information that's going to help your organization. That's really the goal of the webinar. That educational tone helps build a relationship over time, and then it ensures that you're seen as a helpful resource instead of someone just pitching them for a sales meeting. Another benefit is that it is a one-to-many platform, meaning that instead of talking to one person at a time, I get to get in front of many people all at once. In addition, since it's hosted as an on-demand option on your website, it can be watched by many more people in the future. So we can send that out and share it in many ways. The third thing I like to highlight about these webinars is they're highly repeatable. So I have a light script that I follow just to keep me on point. I have a full presentation deck. I can use this deck in other ways. So I can teach other salespeople or marketing people on my team to deliver this webinar repeatedly. I can take this and quickly switch it up into new material, which we'll share a little bit about later. And for example, if I want to provide a webinar on a more focused topic, I can easily take this, change it up, and host a webinar called Top 5 Reasons to Use Webinars for B2B Lead Gen, which is actually the title of next month's webinar. I get to reuse a lot of the same slides for this, but go more in depth into one section. Lastly, and most importantly, from a lead generation perspective, you get higher engagement than with the connect and pitch model that I spoke about earlier. So let me show you what I mean by this from a metrics perspective. Here are 3 different webinars that we managed for clients. On the first line, you'll see, the navigation and the headers, which is very in line with the other model that you have. So you can kind of get a one-to-one comparison. But on the first line here, we had 1,342 unique contacts in the target audience for this webinar. There were 2 emails in the sequence. And in this case, the sales rep would send 1 email to join the webinar and another automated follow-up sequence. There were 63 registrations for the webinar example here, which gave us an engagement of 4.6%. So if you take that number, which is the low number on this chart, and you compare it to the 0.6%, which is the high number on the contact and pitch method, you see a 667% increase. Now, on the other webinars on line 2 and 3, the volume of emails went down, but the percentage of engagement actually went up. So you see one with 817 contacts, 5.3% engagements. A smaller hyper-targeted group, 297 contacts, got a 10.7% engagement. Now with this, the common question I get is, well, Josh, is setting a meeting as valuable as a webinar registration or even a webinar attendee? Well, it really does depend on how good those meetings are and what the lead to closed won deal conversion ratio looks like. But what I want to do here is give you a side-by-side comparison of these methods and highlight the holistic approach that the webinar model provides. These numbers have been normalized for a simple comparison using the engagement rates that I shared with you earlier. So as you see, if you look at this the contact and pitch model, We normalized it with 5,000 unique contacts on both sides. The 5,000 unique contacts, if we had a 0.6% engagement rate, you're going to get 30 responses to that. So you're going to get 30 people that are interested in meeting with you. And then you're going to have no shows, you're going to have some that aren't a fit, and it's going to get whittled down from there. The catch with this is there's no ongoing value after that. It's kind of a win-lose proposition. So there's no ongoing value. You either connect with that person, you have the meeting, or you don't. And then maybe the value of it after that would be if you get a deal, like in both situations, even with a webinar. So those are the same. On the flip side, if you take the webinar model, then you have 5,000 unique contacts. Then you get a 4.6% engagement rate, which again is that low number. You would have 230 registrations for that webinar, which is 7.6 times the connect and pitch model. Now with this, you also get ongoing value. So you get website content, you get repeatability for other people on your team, and then you also get training opportunities with those other team members. So there's lots of ways that it can then be used. So it's really about doubling and tripling the utilization of one methodology over another. Now, let's talk about some of the other benefits of webinars, and then we'll move on. We'll just talk about these three, and then we'll go to the next section. So benefit number one is it's recorded. So just like on this, we're recording it. And since it's recorded, we can use it in other ways. We can have that on-demand content in the resources section, which helps us build up sales enablement content for the sales reps to use later on. If a sales rep is talking to somebody about a certain item, they can say, oh, we did a great webinar on that, here it is. Or you can even edit it down and send it as a smaller piece of content. It's also a great source for lead generation because people will find that content and fill out the form to watch the video. That becomes a lead for you. Benefit number two, you get additional on-demand, additional demand generation content, kind of like we highlighted before, but going further. So some examples for this is we'll actually take this webinar recording today, we'll give it to our content team, and we'll turn it into articles, blog posts, social posts, and maybe even an infographic with some numbers. So we'll get anywhere from 2 to 5 additional pieces of content from the work that we've already done on this webinar and that we're delivering here. The last item I want to share from a benefit perspective, number 3, is that I find for a lot of people this is actually a lot easier than writing. People who like the structure of a deck and verbal communication can put together a webinar fairly quickly, and it only gets faster with practice as they figure out the methodology that works for them. So that's a little bit about just the benefits for webinars as a sales engagement platform. And another sales engagement platform that we're going to highlight, the second one today that we mentioned, is one that we work with on clients for, is interview style podcasts. So on the left of this slide, you're going to see one of our clients, Jim Oliver. Jim hosts the Breakaway Wealth podcast, where they talk about creating wealth and the concept of infinite banking. Now, Jim and his team work with a lot of real estate investors, business owners, and other high net worth individuals. And we work with them to put together the podcast, the content, and then we do the outreach to get interviewees on the show. Now, this process is very similar to getting people to a webinar in the outreach methodologies that we use. But our goal here is to put interviewees in front of Jim that are in his target client or his target audience or ideal customer profile, whichever one of those types of verbiage you want to use. So we're putting people that are in his ICP, ideal customer profile, in front of him for that session. Now, when we do that, he gets to spend 30 minutes during that podcast having a face-to-face Zoom interview. And he's using this platform to build the relationship with someone that may be hard to get in front of otherwise. Now, the great thing is that a certain percentage of those interviewees are actually going to take interest in the service Jim offers, and they're going to want to know more. So that means that the interview style podcast is another sales engagement platform you can utilize to generate B2B sales revenue. Just like webinars, this has a number of benefits that we'd like to highlight. And these are, they get all the benefits of webinars as well. So all the ones I've already shared are definitely roll over to the podcast style interview, but I have 4 more I want to highlight here. So number 1 is that you start to become an influencer on the topic and rise above other people in your space through the knowledge that you're sharing in the podcast. So that's really just being that influencer in a certain area and getting in front of more people. Benefit number 2 is what we call a one-to-one to many sales engagement platform. You're spending time one-to-one with a person, and then that content is going out to a larger audience, which then builds up over time. So you get the benefit of that one-to-one FaceTime like you would with a meeting, but you also get to reutilize all that knowledge to go out to a larger audience. So it's kind of doing double duty there for you. Benefit number 3 is the free marketing content. You are giving the person that you're interviewing something in return with very little cost to them, maybe 30 minutes of time. We often see that the interviewee company, the company of that interviewee, puts that in their media section of their website. They share it socially and use it in many other ways. So for example, on another podcast that we manage, the Epic Company Culture podcast, we interviewed somebody around their company culture. They then put it on their careers page of their website and use it from a recruiting perspective, along with all of the other items they highlight that would be good reasons to work in that organization. So we're really giving something back to the interviewee with that free content. Now, the last benefit we see here is much higher engagement when we reach out to invite somebody onto a podcast than if we were doing that connect and pitch model. So we have really good open rates when we're inviting people into our ecosystem for that free content, for that podcast session. Because again, we're coming to them with a certain amount of value, which in this case is free content and a PR opportunity. Now, to wrap this up, I'm going to highlight a few other sales engagement platforms quickly and options to some of the ones that we've already shared. So some more ideas on this are going deeper into the webinars. We talked a lot about the educational style webinar. That's where we're educating and communicating and becoming an influencer and a leader in the space. And we're helping other people in our ideal target audience with that information. You also have general product and service demos. So as you get more people coming to your website, opting in, they do want to know more about your products and services. And so there's a lot of organizations that have standing demos on this. The next one for webinars is roundtables or fireside chats. So this is a great one because the other speakers on that fireside chat that you're hosting help to extend the marketing and the reach of that webinar. And the bigger the name, the better the turnout. So those really go well for people, and the more connected they are, the better the turnout for those. Another option is in-person events. Now, obviously, COVID made this a challenge, but we believe that they will make their way back over time. And some people still choose to get together in safe and friendly ways. So we have a few that we want to share here. One of them is the private lunch and learn. So this is where normally you would go in and do a lunch and learn for a specific organization. Let's say you're in the IT space. You're going to go to the IT group in an organization. You're going to offer them a free training session. You're going to be there for an hour or two, provide lunch. Everybody loves to show up for lunch and share a meal together. And then part of that time is going through training, and we help with all the documents around that. And then there's leave behind items that will only really get filled out if they want to fill them out themselves, or to have you come back in and facilitate that or execute some further analysis or for some further service. So you can do private lunch and learns, and those are great because a lot of organizations have ongoing educational series where they want to invite people in. Another one is the group lunch and learn, where maybe there's not a big department, but there's single individuals. Let's say you work with smaller companies and you work with HR leaders in smaller companies where they maybe only have 1 or 2 HR leaders. Well, you invite them all to a lunch on Friday, and part of the pitch is, hey, you get a free lunch, you get out of the office, you get some education, but you get to meet with other like-minded individuals, and there's some sharing that goes on there. So in that group lunch and learn, we really look at it as educational and facilitating connections. We're just helping make that happen. The last one, and kind of an overlap a little bit to the group lunch and learn, but a little less formal, is like-minded events. So you see meetups and other things that companies run that are with like-minded individuals. So for example, we have an event called Founders and Brews, and it's all about a number of founders getting together to go to a local brewery, and it's 8 to 10 founders, have an experience together, try some new beers, try a new brewery, and engage and learn with and from each other. So that's a couple of different items on the questions, or excuse me, on the combinations and different sales engagement platforms that we work with. Now, before we get into questions, just want to quickly highlight what we provided to you today. So in maximizing the sales engagement platforms, we have a number of different options, right? You have the sales engagement platforms like webinars, you have interview style podcasts, and then you have lunch and learns and other options around how you run those webinars. We've also highlighted how utilizing these engagement platforms can increase sales by up to 667%. So that's a huge engagement bump for the level of effort that's going to be put in. Now, before we get into questions, I would like to quickly highlight that we provide everything you need to maximize these sales engagement platforms. They're all grouped under our FounderScale Attend services. Some of our most common packages are around helping make sure that we get butts and seats for these webinars and these webinars go smoothly, as well as the same thing for getting people to the podcast style interview, production, post-production, and everything that goes along with it. So it's a white glove service. We handle pretty much everything except the presentation or the interview. We'll get into questions in just a moment, but if you'd like to know more, please contact me, josh@founderscale.com. You can also look at the FounderScale Sales Leadership podcast as a co-hosted podcast that we do. And if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. So all you have to do is go down to the bottom of Zoom. There's a Q&A button, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. All right, so the first question is, do I have statistics for conversions from the webinars and podcasts versus conversions for the direct meetings? So we have webinar statistics on how many people actually attend the webinars. And for some clients specific to them, we do have conversion ratios. So for example, if we manage and help them with their HubSpot, we have more insight into that. We're working on getting more of the full cycle of those conversions. But what I can tell you is from a webinar perspective, we see about 50 to 60% attendance from the RSVPs. And then from there, we get a number of conversions from that. And then we're also going to get re-enablement or re-engagement on opportunities. So we actually did one a few weeks ago just to give you a real world example of those numbers. We hosted one webinar. It was one of the first webinars for a client. They had about 67 people register. About 50% attended that, which is about normal. And then they had 4 leads come in from that were legit, that they're currently working. One of the things that makes this complex is because we're in B2B space is the sales cycle can be anywhere from 3 months to a year for a lot of our clients. But they had 4 legitimate leads that they were working from that we know about. And they actually had 2 that had gone dark that were deals in process that were in their HubSpot deals platform and that they re-engaged after the webinar. So from that perspective, you have 67 to about 50% of that attended. And then you have 6 deals that they were working, and I believe they are still working those in that instance. But we will look to get you more knowledge on that in future webinars. All right, next question. Do you expect more B2B businesses to increase virtual-based content after COVID-19? And how can my company make sure that the structure of these types of events is consistent with the listener or viewer? Is that something we help with? Yes, that's something we help with. I do expect a high amount of virtual-based content to really pick up. Not just webinars, but even on other platforms. Like we just tested out a VR platform, not with VR headsets, but kind of a virtual reality desktop application that a lot of people are starting to use and that are catching on. So because of COVID, actually some of the more engaging technologies are getting better, whereas before we might have seen that, that might be a little hokey, but then when people use it because of this, they start to adopt other methodologies. So we do believe that virtual-based content is going to pick up, but we also believe that the engagements are going to get more rich as we get more options past just a regular webinar or more flat style content, like Zoom content. If so, how can we make sure the structure of these events is consistent with the expectations of the listener? I really think that's about knowing your ideal customer profile. What is your customer looking for? What is an ideal prospect for you? What kind of knowledge do they want to know? And if that knowledge is in line with your business and what they need to grow their business, then it's going to be a good alignment. So it's really just getting to know what they're looking for from an educational perspective. The next question here is, if I'm having a hard time finding new prospects, do you have any suggestions on how to find people to get in front of? That is part of the FounderScale Attend service. So when we sign up a new client, we actually go out and we do an analysis of your customer base from real data, straight out of QuickBooks or your CRM, whatever you provide with dollar amounts, and we do an ideal customer profile for you. And then we confirm those segments with you. We go find those prospects, and then we actually target them. So in the account-based marketing methodology, we're naming the people we want to go after, making sure they would be a good client, and then we're engaging in them on multiple different channels to try and drive them to one of the sales engagement platforms. So we do help with that, and it's built into the service. All right, those are great questions. It looks like we don't have any more questions for today, so we're going to wrap this up and let you go about your day. So if there is any other questions that come to mind, you want to know any more information about the statistics, we can gather some extra ones for you from the real world. Thank you for joining us.